If you're an SDR right now making calls, sending emails, doing all the activity, but still not booking meetings and you have no idea why, this video is for you. Because the harsh reality is most SDRs are working hard, but following broken processes. They're stitching together random tactics from LinkedIn, hoping something sticks. And that's why 70% of SDRs and BDRs miss their quota. I averaged 138% as an SDR, never missed my number, and got promoted to become the youngest ever account executive at Revolut, a company worth $100 billion at 21 years old. And since then, I've coached more than 350 reps using the exact system. And this is a step-by-step blueprint that's helped reps like David book $500,000 worth of pipeline in his first month of applying it, and other reps like Max at his Q4 pipeline goal by March. So let's get into it and start breaking it down. So look, before we get into the tactics, we need to talk about the mistakes that kill most SDRs in their first 90 days. Because to be honest, I made all of them. There's 3 fatal mistakes that most reps are following, and we're going to break down each of them now. So the first is following 20 voices instead of 2 to 3. LinkedIn advice is overloaded and just creates so much mental overload. Trying to do everything means that you'll end up doing nothing. What you should do is try to pick 2 to 3 people who you resonate with and go deep for 30 days. When I first started, I fell into the trap of trying to listen to every single person on LinkedIn, which often led to negative results because I was switching so many ideas. I would recommend to choose these 2 to 3 people as number 1, choose somebody internally. Look for a top performing BDR or a top performing manager who is actually coaching BDRs and learn everything you can from them. The reason I'd look internally first is you'll be able to find the nuances and little tricks that the company's using and the individuals know to help set you up. The next thing is I'd try to choose one person outside the company who focuses on processes. The reason for this is ultimately, if you have a process, you'll be able to repeat it every single month. So don't look for 50 different creators. Choose one person internally, one person externally, and build something that works for you. The second thing is reps end up chasing perfection instead of trying to build habits. You will never, ever, ever be a top 1% rep out of the gate. Consistency beats occasional excellence. The goal that you're working towards is trying to create stability instead of mastery. For the first 2 months as a rep, I actually hit 40% and 50% of my ramp. It was only until month 3 that I pulled it back, hit 200%, and finished my total ramp at over 100%. So the key thing to remember is imperfect action always beats perfect inaction. Get started. That's how you'll get the ball rolling. The next one is understanding the difference between activity metrics and being busy and building a systematic process. Most reps just go through the motions versus top reps have an actual system. There's a quote from Seneca which applies to many aspects of life and especially sales, which is life without structure is chaos. If you're just ripping dials focused on blindly going into every day, you're never going to be able to build something sustainable because there's no process. What you should be trying to do is figure out what are the things you can repeat every single day that move you closer to your goal of booking more meetings. Now, there's 3 non-negotiables that I would focus on if I was a brand new BDR, and also what I teach to all the reps who I work with one-to-one in Outbound OS. The first one is a 3-hour minimum of daily commitment. 1 hour cold calling, 1 hour prospecting, 1 hour building lists and sequencing. If you're not blocking time and if you're not dictating your calendar, somebody else will. Your one goal as a BDR or SDR is to book qualified meetings and build pipeline. Therefore, you should every single day block time to do the activities which will lead to that result. Focus on what are the leading indicators, what are the actions I can do that will lead to meetings. Instead of blindly hoping you're going to book one meeting today, commit to making 100 dials. Instead of hoping that people are going to respond through email, commit to adding 100 people to sequences so you have enough prospects in it. The second is time blocking is everything. When you're in the SDR role, it's so easy to get pulled in so many different directions. 1 minute you're cold calling, next minute you get a ping on Slack, next minute you get an email response. And if you're constantly context switching, you'll never be able to do deep, meaningful work. When you're structuring your day around the committed blocks we spoke about earlier, you should just do one task. For example, when you're cold calling, have your CRM up, have your dialer up, and just click dial. Mute Slack, close Gmail, close everything else, and just focus on the one task. When you're prospecting, put some music on and just add prospects. That's all you should do. One block, one action, and that's how you get deep work done and become way more efficient in the time you're spending. Everyone has the same 8 hours in a workday, but it's the people who understand deep work who get way more done and ultimately become the top reps. The third one is to think like a business owner. Imagine you're the CEO of your own mini outbound agency inside the company. So view it as if the company's hired you, which they have, but you are running your own business. So you have to track your numbers, optimize for results. If you just show up and go through the motions, you're never going to actually create consistency. So look at your numbers, attack it as if you are a business owner because you're paid for your results. results. That's why sales is one of the best careers anyone can get into. The more meetings you book, the more commission you're going to make. So view it as the better you improve your processes, the more meetings you're going to book at the end of it. And I promise, you don't have to work longer to hit quota. You just need a process and a system to get there. Cool. So now that we've set the foundation, let's talk about who you should actually be going after, because this is where most reps waste 80% of their time straight away. And that's understanding the 3% rule. Now, only 3% of prospects are ready to buy now. 97% of the rest of the market is in the education and awareness phase. Your goal is trying to find the people closest to the 3% who are ready to buy now. I want you to view it as a pyramid where the top 3% are coming inbound, they're ready to buy now. Below that, we have 6 to 7% of people who are open to it. Below that, we have 30% of people who maybe are open, but they're not too sure. They don't know they're interested. The bottom 60% are people who either aren't interested or know they're not interested. Your goal is to focus on finding the people who fall into that 6 to 7% open to it and reach out to them before they become inbound. The best outbound is finding the people who would have bought anyway and just reaching out to them before they find you. So there's 5 key signals that I would recommend you can focus on to find the people in the 6 to 7% open to it to get faster results. The reason this is so important is this is what gives you asymmetric returns. And what we mean by that is it's leverage. You could spend an hour calling people who are with a competitor and not interested versus spending an hour calling prospects who are already showing signs they're going to buy. Which one do you think is going to give you better results? So to focus on the 6 to 7%, the first signal is looking for cross sells and upsells. Again, most companies have account managers who deal with this, but I do work with a lot of BDRs who are allowed to go after current customers and try to book meetings to get them to upsell. People who are already customers just using a different product are the lowest hanging fruit. They already trust you, they already use you, they already use your product. All you have to do is present another angle of how you can help them solve a different issue. The second signal is resource downloads. Anybody who's downloading white papers, guides, viewing content, anything like that is a great signal. People don't download resources for fun. They're doing it to try and solve an issue. So what you need to do is look for the people who are downloading resources. What does the resource talk about? And explain how you solve the issues that the resource talks about. The third one is looking for followers and engagement. Now, even if you don't have a personal brand on LinkedIn, you can still use this. Through Sales Nav, you can look for filters like following your company, and you're going to find people who are already aware of your company and what you do. More importantly, you can look for connected with and find people who are connected with your CEO and other members of senior leadership. This is such an easy way in, as you can draft a message for that leader to send to the prospect, or more importantly, you can at least assume they're aware of what you do because they're following your company and are aware of the ecosystem. Signal 4 is my personal favorite, as 95% of reps have access to this and don't even think to use it, which is going after closed loss accounts. Now, of course, if somebody's closed loss because they went with a competitor last week, probably not the best person to reach out to. But most closed loss deals are lost to people ghosting and prospects going cold. No prospect books a demo with a salesperson for fun. They're already going through the sales cycle, they already realized they have a pain, and they already thought it was worth solving, and maybe it just fell off a little bit. So it's your job to reinitiate a conversation instead of starting a new one. It's always easier to reinitiate a past conversation than it is to find a new prospect and start a completely fresh one. So look for the accounts who got lost to timing and reach back out to them and show them why this makes sense to talk about now. Signal 5 is one of my favorite outbound triggers, as again, it can be applied to every industry and it works extremely well. And that's looking for job changes. Now, if a leader has been brought into a company, they want to have an impact in their first 90 days. So it's your job to reach out to these people to show how you can help them in their new company achieve the goals they've been hired for. Again, most budget is also spent in these first 90 days. So it's your job to reach out and show what could be a focus for this prospect in the new role and how your product helps them to achieve their KPIs. So that's the 5 signals. But in terms of building lists, there's a few different things you should consider when actually creating the best lists. The first one is to batch by persona. Different people have different goals. So if I'm reaching out to multiple sales leaders like CROs, VPs of sales, they'll all have similar issues because of the KPIs they're targeted on. Versus reaching out to an SDR manager, they'll have completely different goals to the CRO. They're more focused on the team. So you want to batch your list based off the personas because they'll have similar pains, similar KPIs, and this allows you to create relevant sequences. The next thing to focus on is industry, which is who am I going after in terms of the company? If I know that I work great selling to software companies, I can use social proof of other software companies like them to show how we can help them hit their goals. And the third part is the trigger, which is why are you reaching out? So for example, what this would look like is reaching out to CRO/VPs of sales who have just been hired in SaaS companies. And again, the trigger is they've just been hired. That's touching on all 3 core components to create relevant messaging. The next thing to consider is your TAM. Now, TAM stands for total addressable market, and we use this phrase to understand how many accounts are there for us to actually go after. Now, if you're doing SMB, you'll have hundreds of thousands of accounts, so you don't need to do one-to-one personalization. You can focus on high volume scale with triggers like job changes where it can be applied to hundreds of people at once. Now, mid-market is focused mainly on relevancy. So similar to SMB, build-in sequences that can be applied to hundreds of people at once. But for your tier one accounts, because there's less of them, you have the time to do more one-to-one relevant personalization, i.e. looking for things like 10K reports or going through the company's objectives. Now for enterprise, this is where we focus on heavy personalization. Your TAM is much smaller. You may only have 100 accounts in your book of business, even sometimes 10 accounts for you to break into. Therefore, you can spend way more time on each account to create a clear perspective to break into it. Now, this is where all of the messaging is custom. You can do sequences for each company because again, there's less accounts to go after. So how this works is the more accounts you have, the more relevant and generic the messaging is versus the more tight your TAM is. The less accounts you have, the more personal it is. Now, this upfront work changes everything because it's understanding which segment are you in and who are you going after. So your goal should be to build lists 30 to 90 days in advance to create specific messaging for them. Now, tools are great, but they really don't matter as much as the process. Things like SalesNav, Apollo, ZoomInfo all work because you do need to figure out how to find accounts, but you should really understand how to build a process to break into these accounts, and tools just amplify the systems that you've already built. And again, if you don't have these tools, that's absolutely fine. You can do it manual. It will take a bit more time, but you do have to understand that you have to put in enough accounts to book meetings. You can't book more meetings if you only put in 3 prospects, right? So you do need to give enough volume to be able to hit your goal. Also, quick thing, if you do want any help from me and the team to build out these different lists and sequences for your specific ICP, I've put a link below to book a call where we can see if it's a fit. But let's keep going and talk about the actual messaging now. All right, so we know who to target. Now let's talk about what to say in the messaging. And this is where I see most reps completely mess it up, because what they do is focus on generic messaging and emails, talking about features and what they do instead of the pains of the prospects. So what we're going to go through is the tips framework, which is what we created in Outbound OS of how to actually make relevant emails. So the first part, the T, stands for trigger. Now, this is what's happened to make it relevant to that prospect now. This is the first line of the email. So it's also the preview text where before even clicking in, they can read this. So we want to stand out in the inbox. If you don't stand out from the noise, you become the noise. So this is where we can use things like job changes, all the triggers we mentioned earlier, close loss, to call out why are we reaching out to this prospect. Again, the more specific the trigger is, the higher the likelihood somebody will open it. Therefore, saying something like, hey, saw you recently joined company is good, but saying something like, hey, John, saw you recently joined Gong as their CRO 3 months ago after being at Acme for 2 years is obviously much better. The difference is it's hard to do the second at scale, so we save that mainly for enterprise. The next part, the I, stands for implication. So this is based off that trigger, what could be a focus for the prospect. Now, most people just jump from a trigger straight into a pain without any bridge, but we do have to understand that most prospects aren't aware of the issues that they even have. It's your job to paint the picture of what could be a focus for them. Again, I always say this, but you understand more than your prospects. They know their way of doing it, and that's it. They could have been doing it that way for 10 years. Versus, you know their way of doing it, your solution and what you do, and the competition. So you have the full picture, and it's your job to educate your prospect that there is a different way they could be doing it. We want to poke the bear, as Josh Braun says, to create a sort of eureka moment and get them thinking about the issue. The next part is pain. So we need to call out a surface level issue, but then go a level deeper and go into S, which stands for second order consequence. So let me just explain these two things, because if I reached out to you and let's say I tried to offer you a bandage and I was like, hey, you have this like tiny little paper cut. Do you want this huge band-aid? Probably going to be a bit overkill because it's a paper cut. Versus if I say, hey, you have this tiny paper cut, but it's over a major artery in your neck. So if you don't apply pressure, you're going to bleed to death. Do you want a band-aid? Suddenly it's worth it. So calling out a surface level issue isn't enough when prospecting. Oftentimes that's just their process. That's their way of doing it. They've got used to it. So to them, it isn't a pain. The way it becomes an issue that's worth solving is by talking about the impact of that surface level issue to a KPI that they have. And that is what the second order consequence is. Now, second order consequences is a theory and a mental model that I like to use, which basically explains impact of initial decisions. So for example, this is going to be a pretty extreme example, but let's say I eat a Big Mac today. Now, if I eat a Big Mac today, I feel sick in the morning, which means that I don't want to go to the gym. And then if I don't go to the gym, I start putting putting on weight, so then I get annoyed. And then because I'm putting on more weight, I get a bit depressed, so then I eat more Big Macs. And then because I eat more big, and again, you can see how the process goes on that second, third, fourth order consequences, but just show the impact of the surface level pain. The next S stands for social proof. So this is showing how you help somebody like them get a specific result in a specific time frame. Social proof is quantified by how well you can show you've helped somebody. So what we don't want to do is say, we can help people like you to achieve results. That's not very desirable. The more specific and tangible it is, the more valuable the social proof is. So if I said, again, talking about a fitness analogy, we can help you lose a bit of weight. That's not very desirable because anyone can do that. Versus if I said, we helped John, who's a similar age guy, lose 15 pounds in 12 weeks using our shred program, suddenly it's more desirable because I've used a specific metric in terms of how much weight he lost. I've given a time frame of how quickly they did it, and then I've given the solution for how they got there. So when we're presenting social proof, use somebody like them, make it specific, and include a time frame for that. The next S stands for solution. Now, we only talk about our product and our platform as a way for the prospect to bridge the gap from where they are right now to where they want to go. This is so important because features don't have value until they solve issues. So only include what you do at the very end as the way to help people, as I did in the fitness analogy, with our 12-week shed program. And last S stands for a soft call to action. Now, so many reps I coach run into the issue of thinking that if they say, do you want to hop on a call Tuesday at 10 or Monday at 3, that somehow makes it easier for the prospect because you're offering them 2 times. On a cold call, it works great. On a cold email, it's super high friction. The way we explain this is activation energy. It takes a lot of energy to start anything and initiate a change. For example, if it's super high friction, you'll often not do it. So let's say that I eat a lot of food. If it takes a lot of energy, you'll probably not do it. So if I'm trying to be on a diet and not binge eat food, I won't buy chocolate because I know if it's in the fridge, the friction is easy and I'll go eat it, right? So if I want to make it hard, I'm going to make sure that I don't have any egg chocolate in the house. Nobody does. And even if my son does, I'm going to put it in a lock case that I can't access. Or if I know that every single morning I often scroll on my phone, I'm going to put my phone in a different room so the friction is higher, so it'll be less likely I'll do it. It's the same with call to actions. If it's really simple for the prospect to respond and say, yeah, sure, they probably will. If the friction is high and it's a big commitment, they're probably not going to do it. So what we want to do is start the conversation. The goal is to get a response. So use things like worth a chat, open to seeing how, and start the message there. The next part is understanding how do we create a relevant subject line. Now, what we want to do in the subject line is create something that looks internal. So when the prospect receives it, they just open it without thinking. What we don't want to do is use salesy language or adjectives like 10x your ROI, 5x this, because it comes across like every other salesperson. So if I'm reaching out to people who are trying to ramp new reps and offer Outbound OS as a service, my subject line would be something as simple as ramp time or John's ramp, because the sales leader talks about these issues every single day, so it skips past their mental spam filter. Now, there's a few key mistakes that you should avoid at all costs. Now, number one is when emails are too long. What we have to understand is most prospects aren't going to sit and read your email every single word. They're going to scan through it and look for the key information. So keep your emails under 150 words. Don't cut words that add context, but cut all the filler words and adjectives like streamline, optimize, because you don't need them. But keep things in there that add value, like the trigger, like the pain, like the cost of inaction. The next thing is understanding the preview text. Now, I view this as free real estate because when your prospect receives an email, they'll see the preview text no matter what. So if you have a short subject line, they get more text of the initial email that they can see. That's why it's so important to have a short internal looking subject line so we can use the preview text. And what we want to do is always lead with the trigger. We want to lead with why we're reaching out to them. So even before they open it, they can see it's for them specifically. The next part is understanding business pain versus personal pain. Now, C-suite executives like CEOs, COOs, care about the company's KPIs because that's what they're targeted on. For example, let's say you're reaching out to CEOs of businesses. Of course, they're going to care about revenue, profit, cash collected, month-on-month growth, because that is how they get personal success for them as well. But everybody else in the company cares about their metrics and their day-to-day. So when we're talking to a CRO, they care about the departmental goals of the sales team, which is understanding the close percentage, close run revenue, deal forecast time, deal cycle length, the actual KPIs of the team. When we're reaching out to an SDR manager, They care about how much of their team is hitting quota, what's their team attainment, what's their team's ramp time. They don't care about the big business goals of revenue because it's not in their job description to care about that. You can even look at Max on our team. So Max is an AE who works for our team. He doesn't necessarily care as much about the company revenue and us achieving big goals. He cares about his close percentage, his cash collected, and his revenue closed because that's what he gets paid on. So if somebody reached out to Max on our team and spoke about how they can help the company increase revenue, he wouldn't think it helps him. Versus if they spoke to him about how they can help him increase his close percentage with AI call recordings to review and find gaps, he would think this tool is worth it and bring it to me because if it helps him, he'll fight for it. And if it helps him, that's why he'll respond. There's a 3-step process that you should be understanding when doing this. So you should always try to talk to KPIs, not time and money. Every single product ultimately leads to saving time or saving money. So if you say that, it's always going to fall flat. So what you need to do is focus on their KPIs, their day-to-day, and make it specific for them. Now, there's 3 different types of follow-ups that you can do to actually create value and get prospects to respond. The first is sort of value follow-ups, which is giving articles, resources, and thoughtful bumps. And the goal of that is to create yourself as a peer. What you want to come across as is a genuine consultant offering them help through their situation and through their day-to-day. So give them things that add value where even if they don't respond, they can take this away and get value. The second is the classic sort of thoughtful bump. So this is context-based where we're restating the trigger. The reason these work quite well is your goal should always be to add context for why you're reaching out. It could be your 4th email you're sending, but the first time the prospect sees it. So if it's something generic like any thoughts, you're leaving the prospect with more questions than answers. So focus on the trigger, always lead with that. And the last one is actually ending with a relevant breakup email. So many people do this and send cringy breakups, which I'm not a big fan of. What I look to do is always try to get a referral to somebody else if this person hasn't responded and view it as a Hail Mary where if I get another name, great, I can go after them. If not, they haven't responded to me anyway. So what we don't want to do in these follow-ups is say generic phrases like any thoughts or just bumping this up, because when it's generic, it adds no value to the prospect, and that's how we come across as annoying and ultimately get put in the spam filter. The key philosophy I want you to think about is you're coming across like a doctor. It's your goal to diagnose them with a potential issue and offer the solution, not blindly follow up to just hammer them with what you can do. Don't focus on you and your product and be a selfish seller. Focus on them and their world and be a valuable resource. Now, when we're cold calling, it's so important to have a structure that also supports the emails we're sending. Cold calling is still one of the best ways to book meetings in 2025 because with AI replacing so many aspects, nothing can quite replace human to human contact like on the phone. So when we're structuring this script, I often use my pitch framework, which is focused on a few different key areas. The first is a permission-based intro. The reason for this is we don't want to force prospects into talking with us. Our goal is to initiate conversations with people who want to talk with us. So what this would look like is, hey John, it's Aaron calling from Outbound OS. Did you have 30 seconds to hear why I'm reaching out? And end it there. 9 times out of 10, the prospect will give you the 30 seconds, which then we can move into the next part of identifying challenges. When we identify challenges, the key thing is to have pre-made scripts for each persona. For example, if I'm talking to sales leaders, I'm going to focus on the pains they face in their day-to-day versus marketing leaders will be something completely different. So if I was reaching out to a CRO or VP of sales, it would look something like this. I talk to CROs every single day, John, and I keep hearing the same 2 issues. Now, one is maybe the team's doing outbound, but there's no real process. So pipeline coverage is inconsistent. And instead of hitting 3 to 5x coverage, it's often less than that, which makes forecasting nearly impossible. Or maybe the team is doing well, but the leaders know that coaching is the best way to get more leverage, but the frontline managers are so caught up in the day-to-day, they don't get enough time to develop and upskill the team to help them get past their number. But I'm curious, does that resonate or am I off base? The reason this works is we're talking about 2 surface level issues and then the impact of those issues to their KPIs. Ending with, does that resonate or am I off base, gives the prospect a chance to talk where you can then move into the next part of qualifying questions. The goal of qualifying questions is to understand where they're at and if this is actually having an impact. The goal of cold calling is to find people with an issue and find the people who are motivated to solve it. For these questions, I often use something like SPIN, which stands for situation, pain, implication, and need payoff. So the situation question would look something like, how's your current pipeline coverage against your quote right now? Which is to understand where are they at. The next question is pain, which is understanding how is this actually having an an impact. So what percentage of your pipeline is coming from outbound versus inbound right now? So I'm getting them to tell me that not much of it is coming from outbound and they go into an issue. The next question is focused on implication, which is the impact. So how is the inconsistent pipeline affecting your ability to forecast accurately then, John? I'm getting them to tell me their issue in their words, so they say it, and then I move into need payoff. Well, is building a predictable outbound engine something you'll prioritize in this quarter? And this open-ended question allows me an in to then move into the next part, which is tailoring the pitch. Now, the whole point of tailoring the pitch is not every feature makes sense for every prospect. We want to tailor what we do to the pains that they've told us. So what this would look like is great. Well, John, based on what you shared, it sounds like the big issue right now is not really having an outbound process to get predictable pipelines. So forecasting's been nearly impossible. We actually helped Gong to overcome these exact challenges by giving them a structure in Outbound OS for how to do messaging, how to create outbound, and they were actually able to increase meetings booked from 15 meetings per rep to 24 meetings per rep in 2 months. But I'm curious, does that sound interesting to you? And once we've tailored the pitch, the goal is to show how we help them in their situation. And more importantly, we've done it for others like them. The next part is how we move into the close. The goal of the close is not to get them to buy it on the spot. Nobody will, especially in B2B. It's to close the next steps of getting them to book the meeting. So what this would look like is, well, look, I know I called you out of the blue, but would you be opposed to scheduling a quick 15-minute call where together we can explore this further and decide if there's a potential fit? Great. Well, would Monday at 10 or Tuesday at 3 work for you? And the goal of this is, again, we're doing it together. It's not me forcing them. We're framing it as a conversation between two peers, and then we offer 2 times to get them locked in. Don't put the friction on the prospect and ask when works, give them 2 times. The last part of the pitch framework is the H, which stands for highlight the next steps. Just because somebody said yes to the meeting does not mean the work is done. It's your job to make sure they actually show up. So what we're going to do is actually get them to confirm on the call and make sure we have a set follow-up process in place. So what this would look like is, perfect, I'll send you the calendar invitation through email now, just to check, is email your best email? Great. Well, do you mind just accepting it so I know it's locked in from our side? Amazing. Do you have any immediate questions or want to save them for our call on Tuesday? And from here, we get a chance to ask one more question. And I always like to see if there's anybody else who would value from being on the meeting. So once they've confirmed, I would say something like, great, do you mind if I ask one last question before I let you go? Amazing. Do you think there's anybody else who'd benefit from being on this initial meeting, John? And the reason for this is you can often pull in more decision makers to get the right people on the call from the first call. Cool. So now you have the messaging. Let's talk about how to actually do this every single day without burning out, because this is where the system becomes a game that's repeatable. The first and most important thing is to set everything in your sequencer. Whether you're doing it through your CRM, doing it manual in Sheets, or have a tool like Instantly or Lemlist, you should always be structuring when you're going to follow up with prospects. The reason for this is multi-channel is the best way to break through in 2025. So you need to have set days for set actions. When you have it the exact same thing at the exact same time every single day, it makes it automatic. So what this would look like is in the sequence, day one, you would send an email, make a cold call, and send them a connection request via LinkedIn. But when you do these activities in your day should be set. For example, I often recommend cold calling for the first hour to 2 hours of the day, then moving into emails, then moving into LinkedIn. So set your days where you do the actions every single day at the same time, as that's what makes it repeatable. Now, after you've done the initial action of cold calling and emails in the morning, your afternoon is focused more on strategic prep. So this is where you're going to be focused on finding new prospects to add them to sequence and doing a lot of the follow-ups to actually set yourself up for the next day. It's so important that you strike a balance between action and motion. Action is the doing. It's making the calls, sending the emails, reaching out to the prospects. And motion is the prep work that allows you to do the action. So finding enough prospects added to sequence, adding new people every single week, verifying their contact information. So I would recommend doing this in the afternoon, anywhere from like 1 to 3 p.m. And then the end of your day is where you finish off with more action. So this is ripping more dials, speaking to prospects, doing the things that will get you closer to your goal of booking qualified meetings. So the reason that when I was an SDR, our company was able to finish at 2 p.m. every Friday, and I routinely finished at 2, even sometimes 1 p.m., is because I had a process. I knew what to do. So instead of dashing about for 40 hours a week, I had dedicated time for each hour, which allowed me to be way more efficient than all of my counterparts. Now, how do you actually figure out what is efficient and what you should focus on? This is where tracking metrics is so important. You should be looking when you're cold calling for the amount of connects, how many people are picking up, your connect to conversation ratio. So out of those connects, how many conversations do you have? How many completions do you have? So how many full conversations do you get through? And how many meetings do you book? The reason these metrics are so important is you can analyze to see where there's a drop off so you know what to focus on. For cold emails, it's very simple. I don't recommend to track open rates because of spam filters and things like that. It's not worth it in 2025. The metrics I focus on is number one, reply rate. So how many total responses am I getting? Positive response rate. So out of those replies, how many are actual yeses versus people saying no or unsubscribe? And how many meetings do I book? Just because somebody replies positively doesn't mean they're going to book a meeting. So those are the core three metrics I'd focus on. Now, tracking your metrics is going to open up the gaps in terms of what you should focus on. If you have a 10% connect rate, but only a 2% connect to conversation, then there's a big opener issue that you need to focus on. If we have a 10% reply rate on emails, but only a 1% positive reply rate, we're getting a ton of responses, which shows our deliverability is good, but the messaging's not resonating, which is why it doesn't tag to them. Now, if we're getting a 10% reply rate on cold emails, but only a 1% positive reply rate, it shows that infrastructure and deliverability is great, but the messaging just is not resonating with the prospects and we need to remake the copy. Now, the reason I love this is what it allows you to do is reverse engineer your math to figure out exactly how many prospects you should be reaching out to based on your metrics. So let's say you want to book 10 meetings through cold email every month. That means you'll probably need around 20 positive responses because half of those will actually book a meeting and half may drag. Now, let's say you have a 10% positive response rate on these messages. That means you need 200 total replies to give you the 20 positive, which gives you the 10 meetings. Now, let's say that you have a 5% response rate. That means you need to reach out to 4,000 people, 5% respond, which is 200 total replies, 10% are positive, which is 20 responses, and with your 50% conversion, you book 20 meetings. So now we know we need to enroll 4,000 prospects to be able to get to 10 meetings. You can do the math, which is 200 people a day over 20 working days. And this is how you build an actual system that's repeatable instead of guessing every month. And again, some of the reps we coach in Outbound OS, like Jason, who hit over 200% 3 times and is now pushing to become an SDR manager, or even reps like Brogan, who was the #1 enterprise rep at Superside and averaged 183% over 6 months by applying this exact system we're talking about here. All right, so now maybe you're starting to book a few more meetings, but here's the thing. Like, book meetings are pointless if they don't show up and turn into actual pipeline. So there's a few things that we can do to increase our show rates and make sure you actually generate pipeline. Number one is ask them to accept when you're on the phone. As I did in my call script, it's so important to get them to accept there and then, because when you send a calendar invitation, it oftentimes doesn't show up on their calendar until they accept. Number two is to schedule within the same week, ideally the same day or 2 days out. The reason for this is when it's past a few days or even past a week, the urgency drops massively, where prospects don't see the value in having this conversation because they can't even remember why they accepted it in the first place. The next one is to not be too aggressive before the meeting. One of the biggest mistakes I see from reps is they'll send a message every single day, multiple times, so desperate that a prospect will turn up. Instead, reach out maybe 2 days before giving value and the day of just to confirm they can actually make it. Again, view back to the doctor analogy, give value, focus on them, don't focus on you. And the last thing is to track what actually converts the best. Look at what's working with each specific persona, what triggers, what channels, and double down on what's working best. So again, as I did with the email example, it's really important to see what's working for you so you can focus on that. The next one is to actually maintain and balance your AE relationship. You work with them, not for them. You need to have conversations to align on how you can hit your number, but more importantly, help them hit their number. Because if you position what you're going to do as an SDR as directly helping them hit their number of closing deals, they'll be more incentivized to actually work with you, give you the best leads, and sort of help you instead of pushing back against what you want to do. The next is to make sure you actually have a weekly cadence of how you execute. So set sequences, set times to dial, set times to do each action. If you jumble your day up, you'll never get deep work done and you'll just be pulled in many different directions without actually building pipeline. The next is to flip the question instead of saying, who should I go after, to saying, who should I avoid? Some of the best reps I coach focus ruthlessly on disqualification, getting the wrong people out the funnel as quickly as possible so they can spend their time on the right prospects, giving them the best messaging they can. Cool. So now you've actually got this system running with your non-negotiables. Let's talk about how to actually keep getting better month over month. So The first point is thinking, what should you optimize? Now, we use something called the scientific method, which is focused on changing one controlled variable at a time. If you change 5 different things at once and your output changes massively, it's impossible to know what change led to that difference. So when you're testing things in cold email, just change the subject line, or just change the call to action, or just change the pain to see what's actually having an impact to the result. The second thing is to have enough volume to actually get an accurate test. There's no point trying to run a test when you add 10 people to a sequence because the results can be skewed massively. So focus on getting a big enough sample size and enough prospects to get accurate data. The next is to look at time zones and what's actually working. For example, with tons of different tools like Gong or others, you can do it manual as well. Track which times you're getting the highest connect rates. To start, it's more important to just have imperfect action and pick up the phone and dial. But once you are dialing every single day and it's part of your routine, look to optimize it by figuring out when are you going to get the most connects and build your dial blocks around that. Now, the next is to focus on viewing it on a big enough time horizon. If you're trying to book 10 meetings a month, let's say you work 23 days, that means you're going to book a meeting every 1 to 2 days. So literally over 50% of the time, you're not going to book a meeting. So don't dramatize short term where you have a rough few days or maybe a week even where you don't book meetings, because over the course of the month, it can balance out. You don't know when it's going to come, but you know the meetings will come if you stick to the process. And this ties perfectly into the next part, which is gumball theory. Now, gumball theory, I want you to imagine you're at an arcade, there's a huge gumball machine and there's 100 in it. 96 are red and 4 are green. Now, you could turn the key 50 times and get 50 reds in a row. Or you could turn it 4 times from the start and get all 4 greens at once. The point is, if you turn the key 100 times, you're guaranteed to get all the 96 red and all the 4 green. But the one thing you can't control is when they're going to come out. So what you need to do is focus on the action, focus on the inputs. It doesn't matter if you get a yes now or a no now. You just need to focus on ruthlessly hitting your action goals, because if you maintain the metrics and hit the input, you're guaranteed to get the output. And the last and probably the most important is to detach from external approval. Instead of thinking, did I make my manager proud or anything like that, view it as, did you do your best today? Jesse Hitler asked a question to his children, which is a motto that I now live by, which is at the end of the day, he asked them, did you leave anything in the tank? That's the one question you should ask to yourself, because you're the one person who truly knows the answer. Did you give everything you could? Did you make every dial you could have? Did you send every email you could have? If the answer is yes, be proud. If not, you know what to focus on the next day. And by using this process, this is how people like Raf in our community booked 2 multi-billion-dollar companies in his first 7 days, or people like Christian actually used the scientific method to go from 40 meetings a month to 90 meetings a month across his 7 BDRs in 6 months of being in the program. So I can't emphasize this enough, but confidence doesn't come from getting yeses or shouting affirmations in the mirror. It comes from action. Make sure you're getting the action in every single day. So there you go. That's the complete system for becoming a top SDR in 2026. Now, this is the exact framework that I use to never miss my quota, but more importantly, it's what I've instilled with over 350 reps who are now consistently crushing their numbers. So if you want help installing this specific system for your ICP, your persona, and who you sell to, book a call below. We'll see if it's a fit. And if you are a fit, we guarantee you're going to book at least 50% more meetings in the next 60 days, or we just give you a full refund and work with you for free until you do, because we know the system works. But either way, hopefully this gave you a clear roadmap. If there's any questions, drop it in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.